Hello, everybody, and welcome to a rather unusual Frankenstein chat this week. This is edition 210, and you could say this is going back to basics, going back to where it all started, Stan. Because
Yeah,
for those of you watching on video, you will see that it is just Frankenstein this week. Our guest unfortunately couldn't make it today, so we thought, oh well, I did hunt around yesterday to see if somebody was available, but at such short notice it was difficult. So anyway, so we've got a bit of a ranty edition today, a bit of a ranting and moaning
yeah.
perhaps, but with some optimism in there as well,
Is
Stan.
there, I'm
So
tired. I don't know if,
I know
if you
you.
can be
For those of
optimistic.
you who don't know, Stan's turned himself into a bit of a builder over the last 2 or 3 weeks. Do you want to reveal all, Stan?
Yeah, I've been helping my son-in-law redo
Now,
their
hang on. The
bathroom.
word helping
Working with my son-in-law.
or leading.
Yeah, showing him the ropes. Let's say it that way. What happened is, unbeknown to them, the bath that they had been leaking into the walls and into the floors for probably many years. So everything was rotten and mouldy behind the bath and under the bath. So it's been a complete rebuild of the bathroom. And it's taken me, what I said originally was probably 5 to 6 days. It's taken me 3 weeks so far.
Yeah,
We've not finished.
I know.
And I'm shattered.
Every time I speak to Stan, he's in a bathroom somewhere.
Yeah.
What I'll do, Stan, if you don't mind, is I'll put the before and after photos at the end of this chat because it doesn't reveal where the place
Well,
is.
just wait for the after because we've not quite finished yet.
Oh, right, okay.
We'll
Well, I'll
do
put
it.
the before then, and then next week we can put the after. Um, yeah, so yes, it's just the two of us today. And interestingly, this morning, so I've got one thing I want to talk about. There's lots of others, but just to remind you, Stan, this morning there was a bit of a perennial issue that was raised on social media about whether all inspectors should be or have been head teachers. And I used to think that, but then as I sort of mellowed, because both of us were head teachers, that's how we met in the first place, wasn't it? But
Yeah, it was.
but actually, I mellowed, and then it just reminded me of Alwyn Pugh and the chat we had with Alwyn about 7 months ago, where the first 7 minutes I watched it again this morning. He's just brilliant. He's just
Yeah,
brilliant,
yeah.
he's sort of for those of you who haven't watched it, Alwyn was a an HMI for 22, 23 years, I think. But he had never been a head teacher, but he had been involved in teacher education, local authority work, music advisory work, worked in taught in state and independent sector. He was a massively broadly experienced person of immense intellect as well, and that comes over on the chat. So I'd urge anybody to have a look at. I think it was edition 187. Or so. Anyway, about 7 months ago, where we were chatting to Alwyn. So that popped up, and something I did this
It's
morning.
an interesting debate that, isn't it? Because what I often say is the best boss I worked for in the advisory service had never been a head teacher. And people who didn't know her would say this, oh, she's never been a head teacher. She can't do it. But any school that she worked with, there was no question about whether she could do it or not. And
Yes.
I that changed my mind at the time that you didn't have to be a head teacher to be able to do these top things. And then I suppose if you take the argument to its extreme, as I always like to do, you can't investigate a murder unless you kill somebody. And I
Well, they
think,
do say the best police are close on the
yeah,
best crooks, don't they?
but I was going to say, didn't you do some Ofsted in the prison service? I mean, what are you not telling us, Frank?
Yeah, I mean that's a very good point. I mean, but I think one thing I did say, didn't say in the social media bit, but one thing I think we've chatted about before is, I mean, going back to the is it 60s, the Harold Wilson sort of thing, that you need to have experienced something of the white heat of leadership, which is what Alwyn has, he has experienced.
Yeah, I agree, but I also think it's about that wide experience that gives you the confidence to be able to say this doesn't feel right, and
No.
and I think that's the issue now with the framework. It has been I don't- so tight that
Mm.
people haven't been able to go, yeah, I know it doesn't quite meet this, but it is okay. This school is good.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I'm not going
Yes.
to go down a line following one tiny bit of evidence because it doesn't meet and that doesn't happen anymore. But but I think that there should be an element in an inspection that allows an experienced inspector to say, well, my view, my judgment is X,
Yeah.
and that carries some weight. I mean, I was reading a little bit about inspectors losing their evidence base,
Well, I
and
was
I
quoted
thought,
in that. I mean,
I saw
well,
you quoted in it.
well,
I just wondered about some of the experiences I had when we were working on laptops that batteries ran out.
well, the thing is that I remember, and this reminds me of my brother Barry, who sadly died last spring. But as a senior HMI in Estin, um, he was invited with somebody from the technical team at Estin to go and discuss or share the electronic recording system that they had basically produced in house for something like I may be completely wrong, so please, something like 70 grand. Because Barry had a chat with this guy and he said, how easy is this? He said, it's not difficult at all. I'm sure I can get something going. So they were then asked to go to speak to Ofsted's senior staff about their electronic system. And somebody asked, not one of the senior managers at the meeting, yeah, how much did it cost? So he revealed it. And so it was at that point that somebody questioned, well, why have we just spent millions paying to an
Mm.
external company to create the same thing, which actually has not been reliably, providing that sort of support for years. I think since 2019, and you're not hearing the same sort of loss of evidence from Estin inspections, but you
Yeah,
are from Ofsted, and the issue that a number of inspectors have said to me about this is that um, the number which Ofsted quoted, which was something like about 200 inspections,
mm.
that have been lost. I mean, imagine that. But anyway, a number of HMI have said to me that um, that's only the tip of the iceberg because, in a way, a lot of not HMI or even HMI are worried about revealing that they lost their evidence
Yeah.
because they would, in effect, be blamed as being, you know, you haven't
It's the
done it
post
correctly.
office.
It's a bit like the post
It's
office thing,
the
isn't it?
post office thing all
It
over
is.
again.
You
And
haven't done it right. I mean,
I actually, when I read the thing in Newsweek, the
Scores Week.
rebuttal actually felt like the
Yeah,
post office one.
yeah.
No,
No,
yeah, there's
well,
been a few glitches, but nothing major,
no. Well, while
and
we're
that's
talking about this is sort of related, is that also this week, Dennis Sherwood, who's
yeah,
been a guest here a couple of times, and again, I'd urge you to watch his spotlight. It was the first spotlight we did where he spoke about gradings and off-qual and remarks and when is a remark not a remark, when is an appeal not an appeal. But again, this week he had a very interesting article in TES because Ofqual had revealed the success rate of appeals in particular subjects. And as he said, some of them are like, well, you've got a 1 in 3 chance.
mm,
So in a way, if you're thinking that the marking system, the grading system for examinations is secure, I think you probably question it if you knew that 1 in 3 of the appeals were successful, and the vast majority of people don't appeal, even though they might think it's worth an appeal. You know,
yeah.
um,
The other thing that always stuns me about that was that a remark isn't a remarking of the paper. That
no,
that really blew my mind.
yeah.
That it's just a check that the marking scheme has been used properly.
And it's a recount, just make sure the
A
marks have
recount
been
they've been added
counted
up
properly.
properly.
Yeah. And I wonder who introduced that system into Ofqual. I think that person went on to be the chief inspector in Ofsted.
Yeah,
Oh, the one that.
yeah.
Oh gosh, I think it was Amanda Spillman, wasn't it?
I think it might have been.
It might have been.
That's just that really threw me because I assumed that because it's a heavy cost to have a remark, I assumed that went to a marker who then redid the paper completely and then sort of moderated the marks between what was given and what they'd given, and if there was an error, then corrected it, or if
Yeah,
there was a difference in judgment. But
no,
that doesn't happen
no. And of
unless you
course,
pay for an extra thing, I think it was.
yeah. Well, as Dennis said, the lovely Mr. Gove, who introduced many more grades at
Yeah,
GCSE, increased the boundaries, therefore increased the chances of there being an error.
yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Michael
that
Gove, who said you could only have one go at anything. If you failed your maths test as a teacher, that was it.
yes.
Who took something like 4 or 5 times to pass his driving test?
There's something happens, isn't there, when you get. I mean, I suppose the power. I mean, I've never had that amount of power, but you probably live on it, don't you? You sort of like think, well, I'm just invincible.
Yeah, and something happens, I think, to people who've got other people working for them who say things like, you've got to, let's take the baccalaureate, my favourite one. We need something because I'm going on TV and I
Yeah,
want a big thing to talk about. Right, well, we'll make something up. Here it is, the English baccalaureate.
yeah,
Right, off we go. I I, I remember once as an early in my advisory career meeting the new um, member, council member who was responsible for education. And he said, your job is to make sure I don't look foolish
yeah,
at council meetings. So if there's anything gone wrong, if something's gone wrong in the school, I need to know before anybody else knows. So
yeah.
I thought, is that really, is my job really to cover your back, basically? And that
Well,
was
well, it is.
absolutely certain that's what he thought our
Yeah,
jobs
yeah,
were.
yeah. I think that whole. I mean, I do. I've often used the phrase. When like when I was a civil servant. The departmental head or the chief inspector. That they're the queen bee. You've got to protect them. But actually protect them by telling them honestly
Yeah,
what's going on. It's not a case of protecting them by saying, "Well, I can't afford. I can't. We can't tell them about that."
no,
I mean, it's a case of, look, this is terrible. This is the situation. And then again, the stuff I've learned over years is, if you got some bad news, get it all out in one go.
yeah.
Don't try and
Well,
hold anything back. Just get the hit done in one go.
there was a system, I don't think it's in used anymore, in a local authority that I worked in, where if a councillor was concerned about an issue, you got a document with a star stamped on it, which meant it took priority over anything else you were
Right.
doing. And mine, I only ever had one, and it was because a parent had complained that the child's shoes had gone missing at the baths, and the school were refusing to pay for them. And that was to take priority over everything else I was
Send
doing.
alternative provision.
And then there was a suggestion then that the MP was going to get involved. So I sent a very sort of a cryptic note to the agency that worked with the MP to say this is not a battle you want your MP involved with.
Oh dear. Hey Stan, some of this is around the issue that you're going to raise this week, though, isn't it? About, you've been doing a bit of DIY, well, a bit more than
Yeah.
DIYing, but
Yeah, I've had a thought and a rant and a whinge and a moan about life skills, I would call them, things that we pass on to our children and hopefully our grandchildren about things that you do. And then something struck me that the things that we do change quite a lot because there's a lot of things have happened at the same time. I was just before Christmas cleaning the loft out, not cleaning it out, clearing it out, and came across some stuff, some my maths O level practice papers for one
Oh
thing.
wow.
And I looked through that and thought I could probably do all the maths in this still because that, I like maths. But how many times in real life I've had to do a quadratic equation
Yeah.
is really limited. And I've never ever had to divide two fractions
Yeah.
in a practical situation. But I came across my mother's. They're either guide badges or brownie badges, which so we're going back to the
Mm.
1930s here, and it was housecraft, I think, or needlework, and that got me thinking. I remember my mother used to darn socks, and to get the badge, you had to. I have a feeling I had to darn a sock in Cubs to get a badge, and then I thought, I don't know of anybody now who would still be darning
Yeah.
socks. So is if you said to a young person today, what does darn mean? I'm not sure they would know.
No. No.
So yes, there's a thing about passing skills on, but there's also a thing about recognizing you're old and the skills that you've got aren't necessary for the
Yeah, but I
today's world.
remember my we had I don't know how old I was when my parents got their first car. I think I was probably about 12, and it was a clapped out old Thames van that had the win. It was a proper van, but it had windows cut into the side of it,
Yeah,
and we had a small sofa that was strapped to the car with rope. And of course, there were no seat belts or anything. So the three children used to sit and slide around on this sort of like, not that the van went very fast, but I remember my father repairing, taking the clutch out, having to do work on always
yeah,
on the tappets and spark plugs. So I know what a spark plug does. I know where it is. I know, what its function. I know how to clean it. I don't know how to change a clutch on a car. I've
no.
seen my father do it, um, and but then there were, so I, in a way, indirectly, I don't know if other people of our age are in this similar position, where we're like the DIY gurus of the family, and little things that go wrong, like um, a, 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 a bulb in a socket in a sort of ceiling rose, that's sunk into the ceiling. I have to, I go around and replace those.
Yeah.
It's as if the generation of our children, they're used to somebody else doing it for them because it's thought of as being too difficult. It's not the
Yeah.
sort of thing
I,
you do.
I think I can remember. I mean, my dad. This sounds nearly mad now. My dad was an engineer, so he actually bought his first car with no engine in, and
Right.
then bought an engine and fitted it himself. But he also, when I was about 10, 11, he bought an engine for me to take apart and
Oh,
rebuild.
wow. Wow.
So that was in the garden, and I used to have borrow his tools and take. But it meant that by 16, 17, when my friends were starting to buy cars,
Mm,
I was the one people would ring up and say, what size piston rings do you think I need to
yeah, yeah,
oversize these
yeah.
pistons for blah blah blah? Can you come round and show me? And so that's who I was at the time. That's why I was always assumed I would go into engineering.
Right.
Um, but yeah, and skills like that and other things that I've learned since. This is much later in life. When I retired, I worked on my house with a builder, and I learned so much from those few. Well, it's probably about
Mm,
12 months because we did some work at my son's house. We did some work on my house, and we did some on my daughter's house. He built an extension at my daughter's house. But just working with him and helping him, and him being the kind of person who I think would have made a great tech person teaching building, because although he shouted at me
yeah.
and said phrases like, those tiles stand. You pick three. Most people can take four or five on the shoulder and go up some ladders, but you've never worked a day in your life, so you just take two. Oh, another one was when I said, "What do you think about us doing it this way?" And he just looked at me with these cold eyes and said, "You're going to just carry things and move things. I'll do the thinking. You let you do the thinking, things are going to go wrong." And then he said at the end of any or when he was doing job, if I suggested a shortcut, he'd say, "Look, when this is finished, people are going to look at it and say, I won't say his name, did that, and if it looks a mess, that's damaging my reputation. So
Yeah,
it gets done
yeah,
properly, or I'm not working
yeah.
on you."
Do you know one of the things though, Stan, because it leads into the point I'm going to make is, um, the government has, rightly, every government, it's not a sort of Labour or Tory thing, but everybody wants growth. They all, they feel as though that's the way you can pay off the debt. You can provide employment. It therefore gives you funds to do infrastructure work to improve lives for. But actually, the building, was it 1.5 million homes? I mean,
Mm.
um, Brexit has taken away a lot of the Eastern European
Yeah.
builders who we were relying on, and there is now a shortage of builders, to do this
Mm.
massive bit of work, and it sort of does play into this sort of, well, what are schools actually doing?
Yeah.
What are we teaching our children? And is that the sort? Have we got it into such a situation whereby, the children are all expected to be, in effect, I'm sweeping here, but go down the academic route, and then if they can't do that, then we'll allow them to do some skilled work.
Yeah.
Or is it, and is that perhaps just too simplistic? But in a way, I can feel that for my grandchildren, and I can see that in the schools where I'm a trustee. And the
Mm.
fact that all of these things that we need as a government, as a country, we're not providing. So
Yeah.
they're going to come. People will step into those. There'll be
Yeah.
people who've done well at GCSE who say, and I know one locally who said, "No, I'm going to be a joiner. I can make a lot of money as a joiner. I'm going to be a joiner," and that's absolutely fantastic. But
Yeah.
there's something
Well,
wrong that's not steering enough of those young people into those sort
remember,
of
Frank,
futures.
when we reached the age of 11 and there was the 11 plus,
Mm,
there was always this suggestion that grammar school were for those that were academically sort of aimed, and those who didn't pass for 11 plus were probably better with their hands. They were probably better suited to.
yeah,
And I can remember meeting I think it was a teacher at sixth form who said that was completely rubbish. Some of the people that they marked as academic
yeah,
were far, far better with their hands than those. But it was that, and that I think started the push to say universities or college is the true aim of,
yeah,
of
yeah,
schools rather than equipping people with what they need. And I must admit, I always believed that, going to university, even though I didn't go, I went to college, going on to that and doing academic was the right thing to do. I just think we've got to a point where we've almost said those other things are not really for you.
no, well, I agree.
You don't want a profession where you're getting your hands dirty.
Yeah,
And we haven't got that building trade. And I love stories from the building trade. Mike, when I worked with him, the builder, would tell me tales about, when you're working on site with different trades, things like there's a pecking order of trades, and if you are electricians and plumbers, you are regarded slightly higher and
yeah,
joiners
yeah,
than bricklayers and higher than plasterers, and I think painters are the bottom of that pecking order. And I just those things are really. And I found myself quoting things when I was working with my son-in-law, saying, "No, that's not how. We need to do it right this time. It needs to be perfectly square. It needs all these things that Mike has drilled into me in that 1 year."
yeah, yeah.
And maybe there's a case for saying, in future, everybody should do a year
Well,
in industry, as instead of what we were going to do under Sunak, we were going to work for the army for a year, weren't
yeah,
we, or
yes.
something like. Why not? Why not a year in industry
Mm,
at 16, 17, where you effectively become an apprentice for
mm,
12
mm,
months to a company that does things
yeah,
rather
yeah.
than
Well, I think one of the uh, one of a former guest of ours, a previous guest of ours, Dr. James Mannion, he's coming on to be a spotlight guest in a couple of months, and he has a new book. It's called Making School Improvement Stick, something like that.
Yeah,
But actually, there's something else that he's been talking about, and he was talking about sort of like a pizza, and the way that our focus is on one slice of this pizza, which is this sort of like academic. It doesn't call it academic, but it's sort of like a pedagogy sort of stuff. That's the one slice, and then there's all these other slices of the individual that we give very little attention to when we come around to considering, what a quality education experience is all about. I think it's a beautiful way of describing it. And he talks about this pizza being sort of, you really do need to rotate it, because at different times you need to
yeah,
have your full attention on a different piece of the slice, a different slice of the pizza. And I think that's a really, I think we've completely lost sight of
yeah,
what that rounded education experience is all about. Schools do a lot. I mean, don't get
yeah,
me wrong, I'm not criticizing schools for all of this, but the our attention, leadership attention, it's all around results,
yeah.
isn't it? Exams and
Well, I can remember
options and
when we were doing school improvement many years ago, and suddenly it might have been the National College who declared it, it might have been the government, you need to narrow it down to just doing two things. You must, and clearly maths and English then became top.
yeah.
And I can remember saying to people, but you don't work like that, do you? If in your garden you spend a year looking after the roses, but don't cut the lawn, then you've not got a garden.
Yeah.
School improvements about, yes, having areas to focus on, but you've still got to do all the other
All the
stuff
other
at
stuff
the
as
same
well. And
time.
and actually those other bits are just as important to the
Yeah,
young person as that academic element.
yeah.
I mean, it's just to move on, because I know we said we'd have quite a short chat, but I think it's going to be a longer one. Is what caught my eye
This is
this
why
week.
we got guest Frank to
And
cut it down.
one of the thing that caught my eye this week was the Prime Minister's speech about artificial intelligence, AI, and anybody who's been on the chat will know, a big advocate for digital learning. It's the future, and we need to embrace it. And what we've got at the moment is a lot of young people. The majority of young people don't get digital learning beyond, well, I don't think the quality of it's very good, and I don't think that many of them get it beyond year 8 or 9 when they start doing their options. So we have a massive training need. We know digital learning is coming, it's here now. People are starting to use it. There's lots of potential for growth, for development, for us to be a leading country in this. But the Prime Minister's speech this week, was really lacking in terms of its vision for education and the shift that's required in terms of what we're teaching our children, as well as how we're teaching our children, and the professional development needs of that are required across every teacher. Because one of the concerns I have is that if you say to a lot of teachers, I have to say that there are many teachers at the cutting edge of this, and they always seem to sort of like nudge in at this point and say, "Well, we do that, yeah," and that's fantastic. But I'm talking about your average teacher in a primary school somewhere, and you say to them, "How are you using AI?" That is it. And I know that there'll be people here saying, "Oh no, but I know." No, I'm talking about your
Yeah.
average teacher. So I'm concerned here about, the lack of connection here. About it's great talking about AI being the future. We want it to be leading, and yeah, we do need STEM students, expert at that. But actually, we've got, as the Prime Minister, a responsibility for the whole country, every single child,
Yeah.
not just your ones that are going to be able to produce some fantastic bit of kit or app or whatever it is, the next stage. That's fantastic. But we will not get a more equal society if the focus is purely on those children. We need everybody on this journey,
Mm.
and we haven't got everybody on the journey.
And
So
and we've also got to be aware, Frank, of the limitations of it, because I saw something
Mm.
I think it was this morning actually,
Yeah, it was.
where somebody put a question into Grok, which is I think X's AI
Yeah,
thing, and the facts it gave were wrong.
yeah.
And you just think, well, where's it got that?
Well,
Where's it reading that information
yeah,
from?
and the thing here is around, for me, digital learning is about understanding what is what is true and what isn't true, what
Yeah,
is misinformation, disinformation, as much as anything. And I'm struck by, was it one of the Scandinavian countries where they actually teach children, you know, about how do you know that this is a reliable source, or even if it is a reliable source, where is the bias in this source?
yeah,
We're way off this, way
yeah,
off. So for
yeah,
me, the point was around, yes, fantastic. We're going to talk about AI. It has potential. We can't stop it. It looks as though it's going to happen. But actually, how do we now get our whole country in a better place to take advantage of it? And that was really, I was quite disappointed with that. Pleased he spoke about it, but it was the bits that were missing. And we've got a curriculum review going on. I hope that France's review is much more radical in terms of
yeah.
what it does here, because we'll be waiting another, what, 3 or 4 years before we start getting round to addressing some of the
Well,
fundamental
you'll get me
issues.
on my pet subject now, Frank, about how we measure the worth of young people, which in most cases, I think, by examining them
Yes,
at 16. And so there's lots of work going, lots of teachers working on cognitive load theory, on lots of science of the brain. That's all good stuff and all helping. But I think people forgot what it's helping to do. It's helping to make young people memorize something so they can
yeah,
regurgitate it for a test. And beyond that, I'm not sure there's anything else in
no.
it.
Well, the,
We've
the
got
thing
to
is that
rethink what that worth is so
what,
that we don't just say your worth is how many GCSEs you got at
yeah, yeah,
16.
yeah. I mean, on the AI, picking up on that, on the AI front, I think it's completely misguided to think that you need a STEM background to be able to be successful in a digital
Yeah,
world.
absolutely.
The opportunities are not, they will come through that route as well as all the other routes.
Yeah,
And so the creative mind,
yeah,
the musician, the current drama student, the visual artist, whatever it is, that they're the people. One of
yeah.
them may well, if we could only capitalize on the opportunities there in terms of media. I mean, the
Mm,
world's your oyster, isn't it? It's not
yeah.
STEM. STEM will
No,
provide you with a platform to do it, but the actual enhancement of it, the
yeah,
benefits of it, the industrial growth from it will come from all of the other people, not from
yeah.
those people that
From,
design.
from the people who we stamp on them studying
Well,
those
well,
things
that's the point, isn't it? That's the
until
point. So,
until they're 16, until they, I don't know.
well, I mean, in a way that we there's a lot hanging on that Francis review. I think I'm not holding out much hope, but I let's be
No,
optimistic
and
at the end here.
I always
It's
end
something
up
we never had
taking
before.
I always end up taking the far end of the argument, and I'm not actually against children learning having
No,
knowledge as something that they need to acquire. I'm not against that at all. I do think we should have knowledge with understanding rather than purely facts. But we've got to think, why are we doing it, and what are the outcomes in terms of not exam results, but what are the outcomes in terms of life skills and the
yeah,
ability to get on after that, and the ability to mend a fuse if we need to mend a fuse, or to understand our mortgage payments if that's what we need to do. Because we're now talking about extra lessons to do the things that we should be teaching
yes,
as a
yes,
basic.
yes, yes. Well, this is what a normal Frankenstein chat is about, isn't it, Stan?
And
It's
I've still
fun
never
in a
plastered.
hilarious. Hey,
I've still never plastered. I've not done that
me
one.
neither. Yeah, so the skills that or the trades that you wouldn't go down. I mean, yeah, I've done a little bit of electrical work, but nearly killed myself. I can do some simple plumbing, can decorate, can do some joinery. Um, but actually, you're a different level to me, Stan. But you're not.
Well,
You're not.
I
You
had this
wouldn't put yourself as
conversation.
professional, would you?
No, I certainly wouldn't. I was well put in my place by the professional. One thing that one of my friends who's a builder said to me, you wouldn't last 5 minutes on a building site. And I said, why not? He said, because of this. You couldn't resist telling people what you think. He said they just pick you up and throw you into a not the way you talk to me.
Uh,
But
well,
yeah, it's
next week, Stan, we all being well, we will have another guest with us. So, for those of you who haven't quite enjoyed us this week as much as you do when we have a guest, we'll be putting that right. And actually, next week we have a female, uh, yeah, a female colleague who is working in the digital field in Greater Manchester. So hopefully, Bina Puri will be able to join us next week and get us back on track. But no doubt we'll be talking about digital learning again next week a little bit. Anyway, so Stan, the bathroom's finished. What are you going to do with your life?
well, it's not finished yet. Um, the problem is when you do things like this, favors and jobs for your family, the one place that gets neglected is your home. And and the worst thing about that while I've been out doing this is that Jill's been at home and
Uh,
spotting all the things that I haven't done at home.
some of
So,
that painting and decorating.
well, we need got a flat roof, it needs re-roofing. Now I won't do that one.
Mm.
I have done it before, but
Yeah,
I
but
wouldn't do it
no,
again.
no.
I'm getting too old for climbing on the roof. I'm
Well, they
told.
say, don't they, when you watch these programs about A&E,
Yeah,
men
yeah,
in their 60s falling
yeah,
off ladders, I mean,
yeah. So I'll have to find a contractor to do
yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
roof.
Okay, well, look, thanks for joining us, Stan. Thank you,
No, it's a
everybody, for
pleasure. Thanks for
watching
the
and
chat.
listening. And not quite sure how long we've been on for, probably way too long, because we said we might have a short chat, but it was just nice to catch up with Stan again and just have one of our normal chats. So until next week, take
Yeah.
care, everybody. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.